Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We turn now to a Song of the Rolling Earth, section number 1. Of course, it's a 4-section poem. In this discussion, we'll be messing around with just section 1. Of course, this is what we have called Whitman's Dance with Logos. We're obviously referencing the ancient Gnostic notion. We've mentioned already in a prior lecture the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, Logos, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, blah, blah, blah. We're going to be talking at length about the use of this word or words. As we said, of the 130 lines, 22 times this word gets used. I find this one of the most compelling poems in all of Leaves of Grass, and yet I find it odd that few people have actually read and studied it. So I'm excited to kind of hopefully turn you on to this poem. Now, our assumptions are that you've been with us at LearnStrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Talks with Walt, everything from the inscriptions, especially a poem like Eidolons. Go back and look at what we had to say about that poem as we get ready to read this poem, all the way up through and including an introductory set of comments for Rolling Earth. So we'll be hopeful that you have already engaged in those ideas so that we can jump right in. Now, for background information here, I just want to remind you of our comments regarding Plato's Republic. We've given full lectures on this at LearnStrong.net, but you'll remember that the book 6 and 7 of Republic plays that game of what we in 303 call the two-box theory, the form theory of the forms, and the idea that there's this physical realm, and then there's this metaphysical realm. So, for example, we can have a beautiful body, but then we can have this concept called beauty. And while everything in the first box related to the five senses, see it, taste it, touch it, etc., in the second box we have none of that happening. Whitman's going to be playing this game all the way through. Of course, think about his use of the word rolling, as we commented in our prior lecture, as in evolving or progressing. And of course, as we've said so many times, for Whitman, this is a big deal. Now, guys, I wish that I could just read in its entirety all of section 1, because it's some beautiful poetry, but we just don't have the time, so I'm going to have to work right away. And we'll begin with the opening set of lines. And as we do so, right away, we're going to get very philosophic. Whitman is philosopher. He's in some of his best philosophic and linguistic philosophic norm here. A song of the rolling earth and of words according. And again, as we said, this word, logos, of course, the Greek word for this, all the way back to the very beginning. Can I just do this for a second? Taking you all the way back to the very beginning, the very first inscriptions poem, Oneself I Sing. Oneself I sing, a simple separate person, yet utter the word, democratic, the word en masse. And so from the very beginning, Whitman is obviously a poet, very interested in words. And then he speaks directly in this intimate way that he has, as we've seen so regularly in our study of Leaves of Grass. Were you thinking that those were the words, those upright lines, those curves, angles, dots? And then using a construction that's very unusual. We haven't seen it very often. We referenced it in our last lecture. You'll remember that in passage 46, of Song of Myself, the famous Destroy the Teacher passage, you'll remember that he asked it this way: this day before dawn I ascended a hill and looked at the crowded heaven, and I said to my spirit, when we become the unfolders of those orbs and the pleasure and knowledge of everything in them, shall we be filled and satisfied then? And my spirit said, no, we but level that live to pass and continue beyond. That use of the word no, we're going to get it here, when he asks, were you thinking that the words on the page are the actual words themselves? We'll say later at 3a, we'll remember William Gibson's classic play. It's such a precious text in 303, The Miracle Worker, when of course Helen Keller will, for the first time with the help of a great teacher, Annie Sullivan, will realize, right, in that famous water on the pump moment, that the word is the thing. And of course, this takes us back to 3b, the moment in your life when that happened for you. And it's a compelling moment. Were you thinking that those were the words, those upright lines, those curves, angles, dots? No, those are not the words. The substantial words are in the ground and sea, taking us, of course, back to Song of Myself, passage 46. And they're in the air, and they are in you. In other words, true meaning is self-defined, right? And of course, this is a paradox, because how are we going to play that game and still have community or sociology? By the way, that use of that word as in no, like that, this is the only time, along with Song of Myself 46, when this happens. Of course, in starting from Pomander 15, he has that line, no dainty, but it's a little bit different use. And then he asks again, were you thinking that those were the words, those delicious sounds out of your friends' mouths? You'll remember the word delicious in Song of the Open Road. Old delicious burdens, he says in Open Road 1. No, he uses it for the second time now. No, the real words are more delicious than they. In other words, the representation is always secondary for Whitman to the primary. Okay? Human bodies are words. And now he's just going to get, this will sound very much like Eidolons, right? Human bodies are words. Myriads of words. You'll remember in Eidolons, it's the noiseless myriad, infinite oceans. And then in parenthetics, in the best poems reappears the body, man's or woman's, well-shaped, natural, gay, every part able, active, receptive, without shame or the need of shame. By the way, I love that he uses the word best as in best poems, because obviously he's going to fit Leaves of Grass into that category, he would believe, right, along with obviously the great classics. This idea that the body and the soul are synonymous takes us to passage 48 of Song of Myself. I've said that the body's not more than the soul, so the soul's not more than the body. You'll remember it. Nothing, not God, is greater to one than oneself is. You'll remember the use of the word gay, of course, here. It has no kind of sexual orientation yet at all for Whitman. You'll take us back to Song of the Open Road, passage 4. You'll remember when it gets used there as well. The gay fresh sentiment, you'll remember. Notice, able, active, receptive, and then this idea of no shame, no need of shame, takes us to a woman waits for me, as well as I sit and look out. In both of those, he's dealing with this idea that people want to make him feel ashamed. He refuses to allow it. He comes back to air, and he comes back to soil and water, and of course the primary elements, air, soil, water, fire. Notice the dash. Those are words. It's interesting, he doesn't use the word these. I myself am a word within them, and then notice the use again of the dash. My qualities interpenetrate, we're back to the word that he used in A Woman Waits for Me, interpenetrate with theirs, again the dash. My name is nothing to them. Hey, do you remember the Odyssey, book 9, right? When Odysseus will tell Polyphemus, my name is nobody. I think that Whitman is having great fun here. Who is the greatest word player of all time? Obviously, Odysseus. And here we'll have something very similar happening, no question. Though we're told in the 3,000 languages, what would air, soil, water, fire know of my name? Go back to the very first introductory lecture on the epigraph. You'll remember that in the 55 edition of Leaves of Grass, I said he didn't put his name. But by the deathbed edition, he was ready to put his name, Walt Whitman. And several times in Leaves of Grass, Walt Whitman himself and his name are applied. In other words, he says, I'm way more than my name. A healthy presence, a friendly or commanding gesture are words, sayings, meanings. The charms, by the way, only use of that word in all of Leaves of Grass happens here. The charms that go with the mere looks, and mere looks, only time that phrase gets used, of some men and women, are sayings and meanings also. You'll remember the use of a look in Song of Occupations. The workmanship of souls is by those inaudible words of the earth. By the way, only use of inaudible in all of Leaves of Grass. The masters know the earth's words and use them more than audible words. Now, of course, the masters here we're referencing, we think about Musée du Beard's About Suffering, Never, Never Wrong, the old masters. Here, masters will obviously be referencing Homer, Virgil, Dante, Milton, the great poets, if you will. The earth's words, that is to say, earth can speak. And then amelioration, we'll get this word in Song of the Universal, part 4, nature's amelioration, blessing all. Amelioration is one of the earth's words, this idea of always a progress, improvement. The earth neither lags nor hastens. It has all attributes, growths, effects, latent in itself from the jump. Much has been made of this from the jump. In the beginning was the word, and this is what gets us to this tie-in of logos. It's not half beautiful only. Defects and excrescences show just as much as perfection show. Go back to what we've said many, many times, the tension between the really pure and clean and wholesome, and then everything else that we might call through Jungian psychology the shadow. And for Whitman, both of them are important. And then there's a break. The earth does not, we're going to get several of these, does not. The earth does not withhold. It is generous enough. The truths of the earth continually wait. They are not so concealed either. Remember, of course, Song of Myself, passage 52, I wait for you. They are calm, subtle, untransmissible by print, that is to say, translinguistic. We've said this many, many times. Whitman is the great poet of translinguistic metaphysical ideas. In other words, you can't quite get the words to meet the real, the experience, and so he's going to play this game of untransmissible by print. They're imbued, you'll remember this from me and Perturb, they're imbued through all things, conveying themselves willingly, conveying a sentiment and invitation. I utter and utter. We'll play the same game with oneself. I sing, utter the word democratic. You'll remember at the very beginning. I speak not yet if you hear me not. Of what avail am I to you? To bear, to better, lacking these, of what avail am I? In other words, what's he arguing? You have to be able to appreciate the words beneath the words. The meaning, if you will, beneath the words. Below the epidermis, somewhere there, translinguistically, that's where great artists love to play. And then he uses this French word, couche, and then accoucher, and it will take us back to Song of Myself 49. It's the idea of midwifery. It's, of course, the French idea, that is to say, you pregnant one, be delivered. In other words, come forth. It's this calling forth. We've seen this already in Leaves of Grass. Will you rot your own fruit in yourself there? Will you squat and stifle there? And, of course, the word squat can also have a meaning in Whitman's day of even to defecate. That is to say, are you going to ever live the life that is for you? This is this calling, this optimistic calling. This we saw it in Song of the Open Road. The earth does not argue, is not pathetic, in other words, feeling sorry for us, has no arrangements. This is an interesting idea, right? Is there chaos in the world or some kind of order? Does not scream, haste, persuade, threaten, promise. By the way, that's 5. Makes no discriminations, has no conceivable failures, closes nothing, refuses nothing, shuts nothing out. In some ways, it reads almost like 1 Corinthians 13, the passage on love, right? Closes nothing, refuses nothing, shuts none out. Of all the powers, object states, it notifies, shuts none out. Whitman's inclusivity, one more time. And then another one of this phrasing. The earth does not exhibit itself, nor refuse to exhibit itself. Possesses, still, underneath. You'll remember this use of the word exhibit in Paths Untrodden, life that exhibits itself. And underneath, remember in Broad Acts 3 how that gets used, and we're going to come back to it here in a second. Underneath the ostensible sounds, the august chorus of heroes, you'll remember Song of Myself 48 and heroes, the wail of slaves. Hey, let's jump back to Song of Myself, passage 24 for just a second, because I want to ask you guys to remember this amazing echo. Again, of course, we've talked about it, Whitman as abolitionists. Through me, many long dumb voices, voices of the interminable generations of prisoners and slaves, voices of the diseased and despairing, and of thieves and dwarfs, voices of cycles of preparation and accretion. This idea that the wail of slaves could be a part of, for Whitman, what is so powerful about the message of the earth, the logos. If you think of logos as truth, then anything revolving around slavery would have to be the lie, right? This will be his argument. Persuasions of lovers, curses, gasps. You'll remember gasps from Song of Myself 33. Of the dying, laughter of young people, accents of bargainers. Underneath these possessing words that never fail. And then we're going to get the word fail now some 7 times in this passage. 1. To her children, the words of the eloquent, dumb, great mother never fail. It's interesting that he will call the earth dumb, that is to say, not speaking. The true words do not fail, for motion does not fail, and reflection does not fail. By the way, this underneath, below the epidermis, we're going to see again in scented herbiture. We saw it in scented herbage of breast. There underneath yourselves, you'll remember. And also the day and night do not fail, and the voyage we pursue does not fail. We think of the Odyssey. And now we're going to get to a very interesting word picture passage with the Interminable Sisters. We'll jump to Norton's for a second to hear what Norton's has to say about the Interminable Sisters passage. The sisters, the ceaseless cotillions, are the stars and planets among whom the earth is the Beautiful sister, we know. The whole passage, lines 44 to 72, being covered by the figure of time, the consequence of celestial motion, and then for cross-reference, the poem Days by Emerson, whose daughters of time regard man with scorn for his paltry use of their gifts. By contrast, Whitman's unending cotillions of sisters dance by the 1, line 50, the 24, line 55, the 365, line 63, making luminous the faces of men and things, embracing man and all on the divine ship. Cotillions is the French form of a brisk ballroom dance of the 19th century. So let's play that game now. Of the interminable sisters, of the ceaseless cotillions of sisters, of the centripetal and centrifugal sisters, the elder and younger sisters, the beautiful sister, we know, dances on with the rest, that is to say the earth. With her ample back towards every beholder, with the fascinations of youth and the equal fascinations of age, sits she whom I too love like the rest. It's interesting syntax. Sits undisturbed, holding up in her hand what is the character of a mirror, while her eyes glance back from it. You're going to see this in a hand mirror, the idea of reflection. Glance as she sits, inviting none, denying none, holding a mirror day and night tirelessly before her own face. Seen in hand or seen at distance, duly the 24 appear in public every day. Obviously we're talking about hours now. Duly approach and pass with their companions or a companion, looking for no countenances of their own, but from the countenances of those who are with them, from the countenances of children or women, or the manly countenances, from the opening countenances. Notice countenances gets used over and over again. Face of animals, we think of Song of Myself, passage 32, I think I could turn and live with the animals, or from inanimate things, from the landscape, he's used this before, borrowing obviously the word from Milton, or waters, or from the exquisite apparition of the sky, from our countenances, mine and yours, faithfully returning them every day in public, appearing without fail, but never twice with the same companions. And then 3 times embracing. Embracing man, embracing all. Proceed to 365. Resistlessly round the sun. Embracing all. Soothing. You'll remember this from Song of Joys, right? The joys of soothing and so on. Supporting. Follow close 365 offsets of the first, sure and necessaries as they. And then tumbling on steadily. Notice rumbling, tumbling. It's fun the way he's playing with language. Nothing dreading. By the way, dreading here is only use in all the leaves of grass. Sunshine, storm, cold, heat, forever withstanding, passing, carrying the soul's realization and determination, still inheriting. The fluid vacuum around and ahead, still entering and dividing. No bulk retarding. No anchor, by the way, bulk from Song of Myself 23. You'll go back to see how it got used there. On no rock striking, swift, glad, content, unbereaved, nothing losing, of all able and ready at any time to give strict account. By the way, this is to give strict account is only use in all the leaves of grass. The divine ship sails the divine sea. Remember the laws divine right at the very beginning of inscriptions. These echoes are powerful. Of course, we're going to hear this with "O Captain, my Captain," and the idea of the ship at sea. Well, just to finish it, 2a. Well, of course, real meanings transcend the words. Think about the power of love itself as a word versus a concept. At 2b, I think this is compelling, this use of the word sisters. He's been playing around with the idea of the muses earlier in Leaves of Grass, so this is interesting figurative language. We've mentioned at 3a William Gibson's Miracle Worker, and the idea of how in your life did all of a sudden you understand that words had some kind of reference to the thing out there. And that's easy when we're talking about Ruthie's tree, but what about the energy of Ruthie's tree, and how do we understand concepts vis-a-vis words? Finally, at 3b, what was a time in your life when words didn't get the job done and were a problem for you? I hope you're enjoying this reading of Rolling Earth. Come back and we'll finish the poem. Thank you.